She's the only mother that matters to me." Applause burst across the room. My daughter stood on the stage, arms around her mother-in-law, smiling for the cameras. I still held the gift I'd brought, my fingers shaking. Then she turned to me, the same gentle smile, the same voice that once called me Mom. "You can leave now, Dorothy." Laughter faded. I rose slowly, heart hollow, and walked toward the door. But as I reached it, a voice behind me said something that silenced everyone. "My name is Dorothy Lane. I'm 70 years old, and that was the night I learned that silence can be a kind of scream. For most of my life, I believed love could survive anything: distance, betrayal, even neglect. I taught children for 40 years, raised my daughter Lena alone after her father left, and gave more than I had. When Lena married Michael, I tried to belong. Then came his mother, Marianne, elegant, generous, and quietly cruel. With smiles and small lies, she took my place in Lena's heart until I became a guest in my own family. Still, I kept forgiving. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We keep forgiving. But that birthday changed everything. Among the guests stood Rachel, my daughter-in-law, her eyes burning with truth she could no longer hide. And when she finally spoke, my humiliation began to shift into something powerful, something alive. Sometimes the end of pride is the beginning of freedom. If you're here with me, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe for what comes next. When I stepped outside, the night felt too bright. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, all of it still echoed from behind the doors like ghosts mocking me. I leaned against the cold wall, trying to breathe, but the air came out thin, like my lungs had forgotten how to work. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I kept clutching that gift, wrapped in silver paper, tied with a blue ribbon, as if it were proof that I had come there with love, not to be destroyed. People passed me, whispering. Some avoided my eyes. Others gave me those pity smiles that hurt more than insults. It's strange how humiliation has a sound. It's soft, like fabric tearing inside your chest. I wanted to run, but where do you go when your own child tells you to leave? I just stood there, pretending I was fine, pretending I still existed. Through the glass doors, I could still see Lena. She was radiant, laughing with Marianne, her new mother, the one who never woke up at 3 a.m. to calm her fevers, who never walked through snow to bring her a forgotten lunch. I felt invisible, erased from the story I helped write. The kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just swallows you whole. I tried to remember the last time she'd looked at me with tenderness. Maybe on her wedding day, when she held my hand and said, "Mom, I'll never forget what you did for me." I believed her. Foolish, isn't it? We mothers are trained to believe, even when our hearts already know the truth. That's how I survived for years, faith in a child who had long stopped needing me. A waiter came out for a smoke, startled when he saw me there. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I nodded. Yes, I just needed air. But what I needed was a reason to keep standing. Then from inside, I heard the sound of a microphone squeal. The chatter dimmed. Someone was speaking, someone with a trembling, steady voice. I recognized it instantly. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, the one who had always watched quietly, never judging, never interfering. I could hear the strain in her words, the hesitation, and then a sharp tone of courage. I froze. What could she possibly be saying? Why now? Behind the doors, the crowd began to murmur. Lena's name was whispered, Marianne's too. And I knew, deep down, that something was unraveling inside that room, something that might finally set me free, or destroy what little was left. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt still, waiting. Maybe pain has a way of clearing the fog. Maybe that's what was happening to me in that moment. The air leaving not from grief, but from the quiet, terrifying hope that truth had finally found its voice. From the corner of my eye, I had noticed her earlier that night. Rachel, standing near the back of the hall in a pale green dress, her hands folded, her eyes never leaving me. She wasn't clapping like the others. She just stared, her jaw tight, her breath uneven. I thought it was pity then. I realize now it was anger. Rachel had always been quiet, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke. When she first married my son, Evan, I mistook her gentleness for fragility. But she was stronger than all of us. The kind of strong that comes from surviving, not winning. I never asked what ghosts she carried, maybe because I didn't want her to see mine. As I stood outside, frozen in the cold, I remembered small things she'd said over the years. Families can be cruel in polite ways, she once told me. At the time, I laughed softly, thinking she was talking about her in-laws. I didn't know she meant mine. Inside, the music had stopped. The murmur of voices turned into something tighter, charged. Through the glass, I saw her step forward. Her face was pale but determined. She took the microphone from Lena's hand. Marianne looked alarmed, her polished smile cracking for the first time that night. Rachel said something, her lips moving with precision, her eyes locked on my daughter. I couldn't hear every word, but I could read the rhythm of truth in her posture. Then I heard my name. "Dorothy!" The crowd turned toward the doors. Rachel's voice was trembling now, but she didn't stop. She pointed at Marianne. She said something about letters, about gifts that were never delivered, about lies told in the name of protection. The shock rippled through the hall like a wave. Marianne tried to speak, but Rachel's voice rose above her, steady now, furious in its honesty. I pressed my hand to the glass, unable to move. Every instinct in me wanted to hide, but I couldn't look away. And then Rachel did something no one expected. She spoke about love, not the pretty kind that fits inside birthday speeches, but the kind that survives silence. She said a mother's absence can be engineered, that manipulation can dress itself in kindness, that truth always finds the cracks where light gets in. For the first time that evening, Lena's smile faltered. She looked lost, like a child again. I should have felt vindicated, but what I felt was sorrow. Sorrow for the years stolen, for the moments rewritten by someone else's greed. Still, beneath that sorrow, something small began to move inside me, something that had been buried under years of guilt and obedience. It wasn't revenge, it was recognition. Through the glass, Rachel's eyes found mine. No words, just a look that said, "I see you." And for the first time in a long time, I believed that maybe I was still visible. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. That night, Rachel's truth cracked open the lie that had smothered my life. Rachel's voice trembled at first, soft and unsure, but it grew stronger with every word. The room was silent now, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Marianne stood frozen beside my daughter, her smile stiff, her fingers gripping her champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "I can't stay quiet anymore," Rachel said. Her voice carried through the speakers, clear and shaking at once. "Because what's happening here tonight, it isn't love, it's a lie." Lena blinked, confused, a nervous laugh escaping her. "Rachel, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice too sweet, too defensive. Rachel didn't answer right away. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small stack of letters, folded and worn. "These," she said, her hand trembling, "were meant for you, Lena, from your mother." The air left the room. I could hear a glass drop somewhere. Rachel continued, her eyes filling with tears that she refused to let fall. "I found them in Marianne's drawer, dozens of them. Birthday cards, holiday notes, even small gifts. Dorothy sent them all. They were never delivered." Lena took a step back. "That's not true," she whispered, but her voice cracked on the last word. Marianne finally spoke, too fast, too practiced. "That woman is confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." Rachel turned to her, eyes sharp now. "I know exactly what I'm saying. You told everyone Dorothy abandoned her daughter out of bitterness. But you were the one who kept her away. You controlled the visits, the calls, everything. You made Lena believe her own mother didn't care." Every face in that room turned toward Marianne. Her mask began to crumble. I could see the panic in her movements, the twitch at the corner of her mouth. And I stood outside, watching through the glass door, unable to move. My body felt both heavy and weightless. I wanted to burst in, to stop it, to protect Lena, even from the truth. But I also knew this moment wasn't mine to take. It was Rachel's. Lena's eyes darted around the room, desperate for something to hold on to. When she looked toward me through the doorway, our eyes met for the first time that night. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. There was confusion there, yes, but also doubt. The first crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Rachel's voice softened. "Dorothy never stopped loving you," she said, turning toward Lena again. "She wrote you every year. She called. She tried. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. But I can't watch this anymore." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the guests began to whisper. Low, uneasy murmurs that grew louder until they filled the room like a rising tide. Marianne tried to speak again, but no one was listening. Even the music had died. Lena stood frozen, letters clutched to her chest, and in that silence, something inside me broke free. Years of humiliation, guilt, and quietness began to lift, replaced by something fragile but alive. Truth, raw and painful, but mine at last. I didn't step inside yet. I just stood there, breathing it all in, the cold night air mixing with the sound of my daughter's world collapsing into honesty. Sometimes, the truth doesn't need to be defended. It only needs to be spoken by someone brave enough to hold the microphone. It's strange how silence can be louder than thunder. When Rachel stopped speaking, no one moved. The crowd stood frozen, like statues under the harsh glow of chandeliers. The air itself felt heavy, thick with disbelief. Even the waiters had stopped mid-step, trays trembling in their hands. Marianne was the first to react. Her lips curved into a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "You don't know what you're talking about, young lady." But Rachel didn't flinch. "Then explain the handwriting," she said quietly. "Explain why these envelopes have your fingerprints and not Lena's." Lena stared at the stack of letters in her hands, her fingers trembling over the familiar loops of my handwriting. "Mom," she whispered the word like it hurt to say it, as if the shape of it on her tongue had grown foreign over the years. Marianne took a step forward, her tone switching from cold to maternal. "Lena, darling, you can't believe this nonsense. You know how your mother used to exaggerate things. You know she—" But the sentence died. Lena pulled away from her. The entire room seemed to tilt in that moment. "No," my daughter said. "I don't know anything anymore." Gasps, whispers, a few nervous laughs from people desperate to break the tension. Michael, her husband, reached for her arm, but she jerked away, eyes wide, wild with confusion. "Is this true?" she asked, voice trembling. Did you keep her away from me?" Marianne's mask cracked fully now. "I was protecting you," she hissed, her poise unraveling. "Your mother wanted to control you. She didn't want you to have a real family." A murmur swept through the crowd, low, uneasy. For the first time, the image of the perfect family began to splinter. People exchanged looks. Friends who once admired Marianne now studied her with suspicion. And through the glass door, I felt my knees weaken. I pressed my palm to the cool surface to steady myself. My whole body was shaking, not from pain this time, but from something that almost felt like relief. The lies were no longer mine to carry. Rachel turned to Lena again, her tone gentler now. "Your mother didn't want to ruin your happiness. That's why she never told you what was happening. But she never stopped trying." Lena's breath caught. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "Why would she do that?" she asked. Rachel looked toward the doorway, toward me. "Because that's what love looks like when it has no voice left." And in that instant, everyone turned. Dozens of faces shifting toward me, still standing outside like an uninvited ghost. I didn't know whether to step forward or disappear completely. But for the first time, I didn't look down. I met their eyes. A hush fell again, deeper this time. The truth had landed. There was no going back. Sometimes the moment after truth is spoken isn't triumph, it's stillness. The sound of walls collapsing quietly, brick by brick. I didn't remember walking away from the door, but suddenly I was outside again, swallowed by the cool night air. The sky was wide and merciless, the kind that makes you feel both small and alive. I could still hear the muffled voices inside, the confusion, the cracks forming in what used to be a perfect picture. For a moment, I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my heart thud like it was trying to break free from years of silence. I wandered across the parking lot, past the rows of glittering cars. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, the sound rhythmic, grounding. I didn't cry, not yet. My eyes burned, but the tears wouldn't come. It wasn't sorrow anymore, it was shock. Freedom always begins like that, quiet and unfamiliar. My phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Lena. I let it ring. For 70 years, I had answered every call, every request, every guilt-ridden plea. But not this one. Not tonight. I sat on the low stone wall by the edge of the lot, staring at the silver wrapping paper still in my hands. Inside was a photo album. Pictures of Lena as a little girl, her first day of school, her first dance, her first heartbreak. Me, behind her in every photo, always a little out of focus, but there, always there. I whispered into the wind, "You were never alone, baby." My voice trembled, swallowed by the hum of distant traffic. A soft gust lifted the ribbon from the box and carried it away. I watched it float into the dark like a tiny silver promise set free. For years, I'd imagined this moment differently. I thought if the truth ever came out, I'd feel vindicated, triumphant, like a woman finally proven right. But standing there, alone in my sensible shoes and my trembling hands, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt human again. And that was enough. Through the restaurant windows, I could still see shapes moving. Rachel's silhouette, Lena's frozen stance, Marianne's desperate gestures. The story was still unfolding, but for once, it wasn't mine to fix. My role was changing. I could feel it. A security guard approached, hesitant. "Ma'am, do you need help?" I smiled faintly. "No, I just needed to remember how to breathe." He nodded, unsure what to say, and went back inside. The night smelled of rain and cut grass. I closed my eyes and listened, really listened, to the sound of my own breathing. After so many years of being reduced to someone's background, someone's obligation, I finally heard myself. That's when I realized the truth had done something unexpected. It hadn't only exposed Marianne. It had released me from the quiet prison I'd built myself, the prison of being the mother who never fought back. Sometimes freedom doesn't come with applause. It comes with the sound of your own steps, walking away. On the drive home, I kept seeing her face, not the woman on that stage, but the child she once was. The memory came back like an old film reel, soft and flickering. I saw Lena, 7 years old, standing on a chair beside the kitchen counter, stirring cake batter with a spoon too heavy for her small hands. "I'm helping, Mommy," she said, her curls bouncing, her smile so wide it could melt the worst of days. Back then, she followed me everywhere, into the garden, into the grocery store, into my classroom after hours when I stayed late to grade papers. She'd sit at the last desk, drawing hearts in the margins of my lesson plans. Once, she told me, "When I grow up, I want to be just like you." That sentence still lives in me. I can't erase it, no matter how many years of distance piled on top of it. When her father left us, she didn't cry. She looked at me and said, "It's okay, Mom. You still have me." And for a long time, that was enough. We were a team, 2 stubborn hearts surviving a quiet world. I remembered our little apartment back then, the leaky faucet, the secondhand furniture, the window that whistled when the wind was high. We had so little, but she never made me feel poor. Every night before bed, she'd whisper, "You're the best mom in the world." I used to think love like that couldn't break. But life changes slowly, then all at once. When Lena turned 16, She started to pull away. New friends, new dreams, new people telling her that I was too strict, too small, too ordinary. I saw the distance before it had a name. Then Michael arrived. He was handsome, charming, the kind of man who made people laugh easily. And with him came Marianne, elegant, flawless, the kind of woman who made everyone else feel smaller without saying a word. From the start, I could feel her studying me, searching for the cracks. I tried to warn Lena once. She smiled and said, "Mom, not everyone's like Dad. Marianne's just kind." That was the beginning of my silence. Because what mother wants to be the jealous one? The difficult one? The woman her daughter rolls her eyes at? So I folded my worries into quiet prayers and pretended I was okay. But watching that little girl stir cake batter in my mind, I wanted to reach through time and hold her again. I wanted to whisper, "Be careful who tells you what love looks like." I turned the corner onto my street, headlights brushing over the lilac bushes I planted the year Lena left for college. They bloom every spring like clockwork, faithful, even when the world forgets them. I parked, sat still for a while, and let the silence fill the car. Motherhood, I realized, is a kind of haunting. We never stop living in the echoes of our children's voices. The first time I met Michael, I wanted to like him. He had that calm, polished charm that puts people at ease, the kind of smile that makes you believe he'd never hurt anyone. He called me Mrs. Lane at first, so polite, so proper, and brought flowers every time he visited. I remember thinking, maybe my daughter's finally safe. At the wedding, Lena glowed in a way I'd never seen before. She laughed easily, her eyes sparkling beneath the fairy lights. I stood there watching her dance, pretending not to notice the distance already growing between us. She didn't reach for my hand when the music slowed. She didn't glance back to make sure I was okay. And when the photographer called for a family photo, Marianne stood gracefully beside her son and my daughter, right where I should have been. At the reception, Marianne found her way to me. Her perfume was expensive, her tone careful. "You raised such a wonderful girl," she said, resting a hand on my arm. "You must be proud." I smiled, trying to ignore the chill behind her warmth. "I am," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Of course now she'll be our girl, won't she?" Our girl. The word slid under my skin like glass. It started small after that. Phone calls cut short, invitations that must have gotten lost. Holidays rearranged to fit their schedule. Marianne always had an explanation, always said it with that same gentle smile. I began to see her power in subtle gestures, the way she touched Lena's shoulder when she spoke, guiding her through conversations, how she handled Michael's business dinners and church donations, always with an air of selfless generosity. Everyone admired her. And why wouldn't they? She was beautiful, wealthy, poised. I was the opposite, a retired teacher in worn shoes, speaking too softly, holding on too long. One Sunday at a family brunch, I brought a pie, Lena's favorite, peach and cinnamon. Marianne took one bite, set her fork down, and said sweetly, "Oh, how quaint. You made it from scratch? That's so old-fashioned." Lena laughed, not cruelly, but enough to sting. That was the moment I realized I had been replaced, not just as a mother, but as a story. Marianne was rewriting me in front of everyone, turning me from the woman who had given everything into the woman who couldn't let go. Still, I stayed polite. I smiled when they smiled, clapped when they clapped. Because that's what love taught me, endurance. I thought if I kept showing up, kept forgiving, I might be remembered. But the truth is, Marianne didn't want my forgiveness. She wanted my absence. And little by little, she got it. By the time Lena turned 35, Marianne's voice had replaced mine entirely. And I, foolishly, still believed an invitation to her birthday party might mean reconciliation. Sometimes the cruelest lies are spoken through kindness, and sometimes the most dangerous thieves steal with a smile. There's a kind of motherhood no one talks about, the kind that costs you everything while making you invisible. That's what I became, an ATM mother. I didn't realize it at first. It starts small, tiny favors, quiet help, a check, just until next month. But months turn into years, and before you know it, love feels like an invoice you'll never finish paying. When Lena and Michael bought their house, they said it was just a little tight until the business takes off. I handed over my savings without thinking. It's not a loan, I told them. It's a gift. I even laughed, trying to sound generous. Inside, I felt like a mother finally being needed again. Then came the phone calls, each one a little colder. Mom, we're short on the taxes. Mom, Marianne said we should invest in this deal. Mom, we'll pay you back soon. The word mom became less of a name and more of a password to my wallet. I kept telling myself it was fine. That's what parents do. We help. But sometimes help is just another way of saying, I'm afraid they'll stop calling if I say no. There were moments, small ones, that should have opened my eyes. Like the day I overheard Marianne on the phone saying, "Don't worry, she'll cover it. She always does." Or when I brought over groceries and Lena said, "You didn't have to. Marianne already took care of it." Her voice filled with a kind of pride that shut me out completely. I learned to stay quiet during dinners. I watched them laugh at jokes I didn't understand, talk about vacations I hadn't been invited to, and smile at a woman who wore the title of mother like a borrowed crown. Once, I brought a framed photo of Lena as a child, missing teeth, flour on her cheeks from helping me bake cookies. I placed it on their mantel, thinking it might remind her of us. The next time I visited, it was gone. In its place stood a new frame, a picture of Lena and Marianne at a charity gala. I drove home that day with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The highway lights blurred through tears I wouldn't let fall. I told myself she was happy, that happiness was enough, even if I wasn't part of it. But deep down, I knew I'd become something smaller than a mother, an obligation wrapped in patience, a purse with a pulse. One night, as I went over my bills, I saw how much I'd given her, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to prove love, I thought. But love doesn't need proof. Fear does. And mine had been running my heart for too long. That was the night I whispered to myself for the first time, "You've become a ghost that pays rent in someone else's life." I didn't stop helping right away. It takes more than pain to break a habit built from love. But a seed was planted that night. A quiet question that would keep growing until it broke the surface. What happens when the giver finally stops giving? If you ever meet a woman like Marianne, you won't see her darkness right away. She's the kind of person who knows exactly how to make you feel small while making you thank her for it. Every word is dipped in honey, every gesture rehearsed. Her kindness is a performance, and her audience willingly captive. I used to tell myself she meant well, that her controlling ways were just part of her personality. But there's a difference between someone who helps and someone who handles. Marianne handled people. She studied their fears and their pride until she could pull their strings without them noticing. With Lena, it started like flattery. "You're so independent," Marianne would say. "So different from your mother's generation." Then came the subtle corrections. The clothes that weren't sophisticated enough, the friends who weren't aligned with their social circle. Soon my daughter's laugh changed. It became lighter, polite, a sound built for approval. I watched it happen, the slow rewriting of her soul. And the worst part? She believed it was love. Marianne invited me to lunches at first. "We're family," she'd say, smiling that perfect smile. But those lunches always ended the same way. Me leaving with a polite headache, her leaving with another piece of my daughter. She'd lean across the table, her voice soft. "You've done such a wonderful job, Dorothy. Really. But maybe it's time to let her live her own life." It sounded reasonable, even kind, until I realized that her own life meant under Marianne's roof, under Marianne's rules. Lena began to echo her words without realizing it. "Mom, you worry too much. Mom, you don't understand how things work now. Mom, Marianne just wants what's best." Every sentence carried a little more distance, a little more dismissal. One afternoon, at their house, I walked into the kitchen and heard them whispering. Marianne's voice was low, deliberate. She still tries to control you, doesn't she? Poor thing. Some mothers can't let go. Lena laughed, not cruelly, but carelessly, and said, "She means well. She just doesn't know when to stop." That was the sound of a door closing, quietly, permanently. Marianne noticed me at the doorway then, her expression never faltering. "Oh, Dorothy," she said smoothly. "We were just talking about how hard it must be for you. Letting go isn't easy." Her tone was warm, her eyes triumphant. I smiled because crying would have given her too much. But something inside me began to wilt that day, a truth I wasn't ready to face. Love can't survive where lies are fed. By the time Lena's 35th birthday arrived, Marianne had built herself into a legend. The elegant matriarch, the philanthropist, the devoted second mother. She had money, influence, and the confidence of someone who'd rewritten an entire story, mine, and made everyone applaud her for it. And I kept sending cards that never reached my daughter. Some women destroy with cruelty, others destroy with charm. Marianne's weapon was grace sharpened into a blade. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, tucked between bills and catalogs. I almost missed it. Cream-colored, elegant, her handwriting on the front. Lena Thompson now, not Lane. I traced the letters with my thumb, my heart already trembling with questions. When I opened it, gold confetti spilled onto the table. Inside, a message written in neat cursive. "Mom, we're celebrating my 35th birthday next Saturday. It would mean a lot if you came. Love, Lena." For a long time, I just stared at it. The word love shimmered under the light, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe it. Maybe the silence was over. Maybe she'd finally remembered who I was, not just the woman who paid her bills or sent unanswered cards, but her mother. I stood up, pressing the card to my chest, and laughed through a sob. The house felt suddenly alive again. I walked from room to room as if preparing for company. I even spoke out loud, "She wants me there. She really wants me there." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake imagining how it would go. She'd see me at the door, her eyes would soften, and everything would dissolve into forgiveness. I'd tell her how proud I was. She'd say she missed me. We'd cry, maybe dance, like the old days when we used to make cake at midnight just because we could. The next morning, I called Rachel to tell her the news. "She invited me," I said, barely holding back tears. There was a pause on the line, the kind that holds more than words. "That's wonderful," Rachel said carefully, but her tone wasn't excitement. It was concern. "Dorothy, just promise me you'll take care of yourself, okay?" "I will," I said, forcing a smile she couldn't see. "It's just a birthday. It's a new start." I spent the rest of the week preparing like it was Christmas morning. I bought a new dress, light blue with tiny white flowers. I had my hair done at the little salon downtown, where Mrs. Porter, the hairdresser, told me I looked 20 years younger. I laughed and said, "Let's hope my daughter thinks so too." Then came the gift. I wanted it to mean something only a mother could give. So I made an album. I dug through every drawer, every dusty box, pulling out photos from decades ago. Lena's first steps, her high school graduation, the night she fell asleep on my lap after her first heartbreak. I added notes under each one, little reminders of who we once were. When I was done, I wrapped it in silver paper and tied it with a blue ribbon. It looked small, almost fragile, sitting there on the kitchen table. But to me, it was everything. I practiced my entrance in the mirror over and over, like a woman rehearsing a role she's waited a lifetime to play. I told myself, this time will be different. Because that's what hope does. It tricks you into believing that maybe, just maybe, the ending can still be rewritten. The night before the party, I laid my dress across the bed, smoothing out every wrinkle like it was a peace offering. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender and starch. It wasn't fancy, just a soft blue, simple, with sleeves that hid the years I wore on my arms. But to me, it felt like armor, a small rebellion against the idea that I no longer belonged. I polished my shoes, packed the photo album into a gift bag, and sat at the kitchen table staring at it. The house was quiet, the clock ticking in steady beats. I thought about what I'd say when I saw her again. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I missed you." Simple words, but heavy with all the ones I'd swallowed over the years. For a moment, I almost called her, to make sure she really wanted me there. But fear whispered back, "What if she says no?" So I didn't. I let hope win that round. The next morning, I woke early, unable to eat. The sunlight spilled through the window like forgiveness. I put on my dress, my pearls, my old wedding ring, the one I'd stopped wearing decades ago. I told myself it wasn't nostalgia, it was closure. On the way to the venue, I rehearsed small talk in my head, compliments, polite laughter, questions about her work, her life. I imagined her saying, "I'm glad you came, Mom." I imagined applause, maybe even a hug. It was foolish, maybe, but faith always is. When I arrived, I sat in the car for a long moment before going in. I watched people laughing at the entrance, women in glittering dresses, men in suits that smelled like money and comfort. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I wasn't used to these places anymore. I'd spent too many years fading into smaller rooms, smaller roles. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and said softly, "You're still her mother. Remember that." Then I opened the door and stepped out. Inside, the music was soft, elegant. Waiters moved through the crowd with champagne trays. I spotted Lena across the room, her hair pinned up, her dress the color of champagne. She looked radiant, surrounded by friends by them. And then she saw me. For one fleeting second, I saw something in her eyes. Hesitation, maybe warmth. Then Marianne appeared at her side, whispering something, and it was gone. Lena's expression tightened into a polite smile, the kind you give a stranger you don't want to offend. She approached, kissed my cheek, thanked me for coming, and then moved on before I could say a word. I stood there, smiling at no one, clutching the gift bag like it was a lifeline. I found an empty table near the back and sat quietly, watching her laugh with Marianne. She leaned into her, head resting lightly on the woman's shoulder. I tried to tell myself it was fine. Maybe this was how love looked now. Different, distant, but still real. When the lights dimmed and everyone gathered near the stage, I felt my heart flutter. It was almost time for her speech. Maybe she'd say something kind. Maybe she'd remember me. Hope is stubborn that way. It never checks if the door is locked before trying again. The lights dimmed to gold. A slow melody filled the room, and everyone turned toward the stage. My daughter stood there, confident, elegant, a woman who had become everything I once dreamed for her. My heart swelled with pride, despite everything. For a moment, I forgot the distance between us. I even clapped when she took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady, clear. "Tonight, I'm surrounded by people who have shaped my life, who've taught me what love and strength really mean." I smiled. Maybe this is it, I thought. Maybe she'll say it. She looked across the room, her gaze sweeping over faces until it stopped on Marianne, sitting front and center, glowing in approval. "First," Lena said, "I want to thank the woman who's been my guide, my protector, and my true inspiration." The applause started before she finished the sentence. My hands froze mid-clap. I watched her cross the stage and wrap her arms around Marianne. "This is the only mother that matters to me," she said into the microphone. The words didn't hit me all at once. They seeped in, slow and poisonous. The crowd erupted in cheers, laughter, camera flashes. I sat still, my pulse thudding in my ears, my breath catching. I must have looked calm, but inside, something in me cracked like glass. Lena turned, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. Her smile softened, and for a moment I thought, maybe she'll fix this, maybe it's just a joke. Then she said it. "Dorothy, you can leave now." It was almost gentle, the way she said it, like an afterthought. The room went quiet. The band stopped mid-note. I felt every gaze shift toward me, sharp and uncertain. I rose slowly, the silver-wrapped gift still in my lap. My fingers gripped it too tightly, crushing the ribbon. I heard a glass clink somewhere, a whisper. Did she really say that? I smiled, though my lips trembled. Happy birthday, sweetheart, I whispered, though she couldn't hear me over the silence. Then I walked toward the exit, each step deliberate, each breath an act of dignity. No one stopped me. No one spoke. Only Marianne's face followed me, calm, satisfied, untouchable. At the doorway, I turned one last time. My daughter's back was already turned to me, her arms around her new mother. And then something unexpected happened. I saw Rachel, my daughter-in-law, rise from her seat at the far corner. She wasn't clapping. She was watching me, her face pale, her eyes wide with something fierce and unspoken. It was a brief moment, maybe 2 seconds, but I felt it. The shift, the tension in the air right before a storm. I pushed open the door and stepped into the night, leaving behind the music, the applause, the pretending. The sound faded as the door closed, but inside, a different sound began. The faint, trembling hum of a truth that was about to break free. Because even humiliation has a limit. And that night, I had just reached mine. Inside that glittering room, where cruelty had just been dressed as celebration, Rachel stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor with a sound so sharp it sliced through the applause. The microphone in Lena's hand trembled as Rachel walked toward her. Steady, calm, unstoppable. At first, everyone assumed she was going to help smooth things over. That's what Rachel always did. She was the peacemaker, the one who diffused tension with grace. But not this time. There was something different in her eyes, a kind of quiet rage, the kind that grows only in people who've seen too much. She took the microphone from my daughter's hand. For a moment, she didn't speak. The silence stretched. You could hear the air conditioning hum, the clinking of someone setting down a glass. Before we keep celebrating, Rachel said finally, her voice trembling but firm, there's something I need to say. Lena blinked, her smile faltering. Rachel, not now. No, Lena, Rachel interrupted, her voice stronger now. Now. She turned slightly, looking at the guests, her gaze steady and raw. I've been part of this family long enough to know when something's wrong. And what just happened here, what we all just watched, was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marianne shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Rachel took a deep breath. I found something, she said. Something that explains why this family looks the way it does. Why a mother was pushed out of her daughter's life. The room went still again. Marianne's painted smile froze like porcelain. Rachel reached into her purse and pulled out the small stack of envelopes. She held them up for everyone to see. These are letters, she said. Letters Dorothy wrote to her daughter. Birthday wishes, Christmas notes, photos, even money for college. All of them hidden, all of them unopened. Gasps. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone whispered my name. Rachel's voice broke slightly. They were never delivered. They were kept in a drawer. And do you know whose drawer I found them in? Her eyes found Marianne. Every sound in the room disappeared. Marianne's hands gripped her chair. You have no right, she began, but Rachel cut her off. I have every right, she said, the words sharp and clear. Because I've watched this lie long enough. I've watched Dorothy treated like she didn't exist, and I've watched you all applaud the woman who made it happen. Lena's face had gone pale. Her eyes darted between Rachel and Marianne. That's not possible, she whispered. She wouldn't. But Marianne didn't deny it. She just sat there, her expression tightening, her silence speaking louder than any excuse could. Rachel's voice softened now, shaking with emotion. Dorothy never stopped loving you, Lena. She never left you. She was kept away. The crowd was motionless. I could almost feel the weight of their realization pressing through the walls. Outside, I stood frozen by the door, my hand gripping the handle, listening to the truth finally find its way into the light. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel invisible. Sometimes it doesn't take power to change everything. It just takes one woman brave enough to tell the truth out loud. The room didn't explode with shouting. It imploded. The air itself seemed to sink, thick with disbelief. No one looked at Marianne anymore. They looked at each other, searching for a version of the story that would make sense. But there wasn't one. Marianne stood slowly, her chair scraping the marble floor. "This is absurd," she said, her voice trembling between fury and control. "Those letters, anyone could have put them there. You have no proof." Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. The proof was in Marianne's eyes, in the way her perfect posture wilted for the first time. Lena held one of the envelopes as if it were radioactive. Her thumb traced the handwriting, my handwriting, like it was the first time she had ever seen it. This can't be real," she whispered. "Read it," Rachel said softly. Lena hesitated, then unfolded the letter. My words spilled out into the microphone's quiet hum, my voice suddenly alive again through her trembling lips. "My dearest Lena, I miss you every day. I hope you're eating well and sleeping enough. I don't want to bother you, sweetheart. I just need you to know that no matter how far you go, you're still my greatest joy." Her voice broke on the last line. The room was silent, except for that tiny, fragile sound. A daughter crying for the mother she thought she'd lost. People started whispering. Marianne's friends, the ones who once clung to her like satellites, leaned away. Michael's face had gone pale. He tried to stand beside his mother, but she pushed him back, her mask cracking in every direction. Marianne straightened her shoulders. "You don't understand," she snapped. "Dorothy was always manipulating her, making her feel guilty. I was protecting Lena from her toxicity." Rachel's eyes flashed. "You call love toxic because you've never felt it." The words hit like a slap. The crowd gasped. Marianne turned toward Lena, desperate now. "You believe me, don't you? I only wanted the best for you." But Lena couldn't speak. She sank into a chair, the letters trembling in her hands. Every story she'd been told was unraveling right there under the golden lights and champagne haze. And outside, through the glass, I could see her world falling apart. The glitter, the applause, the lies, all collapsing under the weight of truth. Rachel glanced toward the door then, toward me. I didn't move. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to burst in, to hold my daughter, to tell her it was all right. But another part, the quiet, wounded, wiser part, knew she needed to feel this fall before she could stand again. The crowd began to shift, murmurs rising. Marianne grabbed her purse, muttering something about defamation, about how this wasn't over. But it was. Everyone knew it. Even she did. As she stormed toward the exit, she caught sight of me standing just outside. For a heartbeat, our eyes locked. She didn't speak, but the look she gave me was pure hatred, wrapped in fear. For years, she'd built her kingdom on silence. Tonight, one voice, steady and kind, had burned it to the ground. And through the chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. The air in my lungs, full and steady, like it belonged to me again. Lena didn't chase Marianne when she fled the hall. She just sat there, shoulders shaking, letters scattered across her lap like pieces of a broken truth. The guests kept their distance, unsure whether to comfort or disappear. I stayed by the doorway, unseen, watching my daughter crumble beneath the weight of her own awakening. "Mom," she whispered the word so faintly I almost thought I imagined it. Her lips formed it again, slower this time, as if testing its shape, rediscovering its meaning. It wasn't a call for help, it was confession, regret, and grief all at once. Rachel knelt beside her. She didn't speak. She simply reached out, collecting the fallen envelopes, placing them gently on the table. It was the gesture of someone who understood that some wounds can't be rushed, only held. Michael hovered close, his hands useless at his sides. "Lena, I didn't know," he stammered. "I swear I didn't." She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the letters, her own handwriting on the back of one of the envelopes, where she'd once scribbled a childish, "I love you, Mom." The ink had faded, but the truth hadn't. A sound left her throat, small and raw, like the first sob of a child who realizes the world can lie. "All those years," she murmured, "I thought you didn't care. I thought you moved on. Rachel's voice was low but steady. She never moved on. She was waiting for you. Tears fell freely now, staining the paper, blurring the words I had written long ago. She looked toward the door then, toward me. For a second, I thought she saw me, but her gaze slipped past the glass, lost in her own guilt. Inside me, something ached and healed at the same time. Every instinct screamed to run to her, to wrap her in my arms and tell her none of it mattered anymore. But forgiveness is a delicate thing. It must be chosen, not granted by impulse. So I stayed still, hands pressed against the cold glass, whispering softly, "I'm here, baby. I've always been here." The crowd began to thin out, the buzz of whispers fading into soft apologies and hurried exits. Rachel remained, her hand resting on Lena's shoulder, grounding her in the storm. Marianne's empire had crumbled in one evening, but what remained between me and my daughter was something more fragile than rubble. Possibility. I watched Lena rise slowly, still trembling, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She looked smaller somehow, but truer, like the version of herself I'd known long ago had finally come back for air. "I need to find her," she said to Rachel. Rachel nodded, giving her a small, sad smile. "Then go." And when Lena turned toward the door, toward me, I stepped back into the shadows, afraid that if she saw me too soon, the moment might shatter. That's the thing about truth. It destroys, yes, but it also rebuilds, brick by brick, tear by tear. And that night, I realized forgiveness doesn't start with an embrace. It starts with a single step toward the door. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through the sleeping city, the yellow lights stretching like ribbons across the windshield. Every turn felt uncertain, every street a question I didn't know how to answer. The night was too quiet, and in that quiet, my thoughts spoke louder than I wanted them to. For 70 years, I had filled silence with words, advice, apologies, reassurance, forgiveness. Tonight, for the first time, I let silence stand on its own. I didn't rush to fix, explain, or comfort. I just let things be. It was terrifying and holy. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the glass. My face looked older, yes, but softer too, like the years of exhaustion had finally found their voice and decided to rest. There were no tears, just a strange calmness, heavy and new. I pulled over near the old park where I used to take Lena when she was little. The swings creaked softly in the wind, and I could almost hear her laughter echoing through time. Tiny hands reaching for the sky, calling, "Higher, Mommy, higher." Back then, I always pushed her until she squealed with joy. I thought if I pushed hard enough, she'd believe the world was safe, that I was enough. But life doesn't work that way. You can't push someone high enough to make them stay. I sat on a bench, folding my coat tighter around me. The night smelled like rain and metal. Somewhere nearby, a stray cat meowed, a sound that was both lonely and comforting. For the first time in decades, I prayed, not for her to come back, but for her to find herself. It's strange how freedom and forgiveness often share the same face. They both arrive when you finally stop pleading. I thought of Rachel, her trembling voice cutting through lies, her courage quiet but fierce. She had given me something priceless, truth. And truth, I realized, doesn't always come gently. It arrives like a storm, but leaves behind clear air. As I sat there, the wind began to pick up, tossing leaves around my feet. I whispered to the darkness, "You did your best, Dorothy. You can stop proving it now." Saying it out loud felt like setting down a heavy box I'd carried too long. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, if Lena would call, if apologies would ever be enough. But I knew this. I would not chase love anymore. I would not beg to be seen. I would not explain my worth to anyone who needed convincing. That realization wasn't bitter. It was peaceful. Because the kind of love that has to be begged for isn't love. It's dependence. And I had mistaken the two for too many years. When the first drops of rain began to fall, I lifted my face toward the sky and let them touch my skin. They felt cold, cleansing, alive. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, the scent of wet earth filling my lungs. This was what silence could be. An ending, yes, but also the beginning of self-respect. The next morning, sunlight poured through my curtains like something new, something I didn't recognize. I lay there for a long time, listening to the sound of the world waking up, the soft hum of cars, the rustle of trees, a bird singing somewhere near the window. It had been years since I'd noticed the small sounds of peace. When I finally rose, I made coffee slowly, deliberately, as if relearning an old ritual. No phone beside me, no expectation of a call. Just the smell of coffee filling my kitchen and the creak of the floor under my bare feet. I looked around the house, quiet, imperfect, but mine, and felt an unfamiliar calm take root. I had spent most of my life serving others, my students, my husband, my daughter. I had called it love, but so much of it was fear, fear of being forgotten, fear of being unwanted. That morning, I realized I didn't owe the world any more proof that I was worthy of love. I sat at the table, tracing the rim of my mug, and whispered to myself, no more. No more apologizing for existing. No more mistaking endurance for strength. No more offering everything just to be tolerated. In the mirror across the room, I saw a woman I almost didn't recognize. Her eyes were tired, yes, but steady. There was no pleading left in them, only truth. That's the thing about dignity. It doesn't announce itself. It returns quietly after everyone else has stopped watching. Later that day, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. The air smelled like cut grass and morning dew. Neighbors waved, and for once, I waved back instead of pretending to be in a hurry. I wasn't hiding anymore. A small boy on a bicycle nearly collided with me and stopped to apologize. I smiled and said, "You're fine, sweetheart. Just be careful." He grinned and rode away. I stood there for a moment, feeling the simple warmth of that exchange. Pure, uncalculated. The kind of connection that doesn't take anything from you. As I continued walking, I thought of Lena. I didn't know if she'd call. I didn't know if she could forgive herself enough to face me. But I wasn't waiting in the same way anymore. I wasn't holding my breath for someone else's redemption. I was finally breathing for myself. When I reached the park, I sat on a bench and watched families pass by. A mother brushed crumbs from her child's shirt. A father lifted a toddler onto his shoulders. It didn't hurt to see it, not like it used to. It just reminded me of what I once had, and that for a while, it had been good. That was enough. I took out a small notebook from my purse, the one where I used to jot down grocery lists and bills, and on a clean page I wrote, "I am not what was taken from me. I am what I chose to keep." I closed the notebook and smiled. That afternoon, I went home and cooked myself a real meal, roasted chicken, vegetables, and a glass of wine. I lit a candle just because I could. No special occasion. No one to impress. Just the simple act of honoring a life that had survived. Sometimes dignity doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You're still here." And for the first time in years, I answered back, "Yes, I am." Months passed before I saw her again. The seasons changed. The lilacs outside my window bloomed and withered twice. Life settled into quiet patterns. Books left open on the kitchen table, long walks at dusk, the hum of my small, steady routines. Freedom, I learned, doesn't come in a rush. It comes softly, like air returning to a room that's been closed for too long. Then one morning, my phone rang, a number I hadn't seen in months. I stared at it for a long time before answering. "Mom?" Her voice was hesitant, smaller than I remembered. I don't know if I have the right to call you." I took a breath, steady but cautious. "You just did." Silence filled the line, fragile and trembling. "Can we talk?" she asked. "In person?" And that's how I found myself walking up the steps to Rachel and Michael's house a week later, carrying nothing but a small box of cookies I'd baked myself. My hands didn't shake this time. I wasn't going there as a mother begging to be seen. I was going as a woman who had finally learned how to stay standing. Rachel opened the door, her face lighting with relief. "She's here," she said softly, turning toward the living room. Lena stood near the window, pale but composed. She looked older, worn down by the weight of what truth had done. but there was clarity in her eyes now and something close to shame. "Hi, Mom." Her voice cracked. I smiled gently. "Hello, sweetheart." For a moment, we both just stood there, two women on opposite sides of the same wound. Then she crossed the room slowly, like someone walking through fog. She stopped a few steps away. "I don't know how to start," she said. "Then don't," I replied. "Just be here." Her chin trembled, her eyes glistening. "Rachel told me everything. How long you tried, how she found the letters. I don't deserve forgiveness." I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the child who betrayed me, but the girl I once held, the woman lost inside her own confusion. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn," I said softly. "It's something we grow into." She took another step closer. "I believed her, Mom. I believed Marianne. I thought you didn't care." "I know," I whispered. "That's what makes lies so cruel. They sound like truth when you need them to." Lena reached out, hesitating, her hand trembling midair. I didn't move. She needed to cross that distance herself, and when she finally did, when her fingers brushed mine, it wasn't reconciliation, not yet. It was recognition, a fragile beginning. Rachel stood by the doorway, her eyes glassy with quiet pride. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. I squeezed my daughter's hand, not too tight, not like before. "We don't have to rush," I said. "We can start small." Lena nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I just want a chance to try." And for the first time, I believed her. We sat at the table, sipping tea, talking about nothing and everything, the weather, her job, her son's new school. Every sentence felt like stitching fabric that had once been torn. When I left that afternoon, the sun was low, warm on my face. I realized I was smiling, not because everything was fixed, but because I no longer needed it to be. Some returns aren't about reclaiming what was lost. They're about walking back into life with your head high, knowing you survived the storm and can finally feel the wind again. The following spring, the family gathered again, not in a ballroom this time, but in Rachel's backyard. The air smelled of lilacs and fresh bread. No speeches, no cameras, no chandeliers. Just mismatched chairs, sunlight, and the soft hum of forgiveness trying to take shape. Lena stood near the grill, helping Michael with the food, her hair loose, her laughter careful but real. When she saw me arrive, she didn't hesitate. She came toward me with a small, uncertain smile. "I'm glad you came," she said. "So am I," I replied. And for the first time in years, those words weren't armor. They were truth. Rachel brought out lemonade and placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's a good day," she whispered. I looked at her, this woman who had changed everything, and nodded. "It is." There was no grand apology, no dramatic embrace, just small gestures, a shared smile, a steady glance, the quiet grace of people trying again. Sometimes healing doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like passing someone the salt across the table. As the afternoon unfolded, Lena sat beside me. We talked about her son, her work, her fears. At one point, she paused and said softly, "I read every letter, Mom." Her voice broke. They were beautiful. I reached for her hand, our fingers intertwining naturally, like the years hadn't fully won. "They were never meant to hurt," I said. "I know," she whispered, "and I'm sorry for the years that did." That was all. No more words were needed. When the sun began to set, Rachel called everyone into the yard. "Dorothy has something she wants to share," she said, smiling. I hadn't planned to speak, but I stood anyway, the golden light touching my face. "I just want to thank you all," I began, my voice soft but firm. For years, I believed that dignity meant keeping quiet. But I've learned that silence is only noble when it's chosen, not when it's demanded. The yard was still. Even the wind seemed to listen. "I also want to announce something," I continued. "I'm starting a small foundation in my husband's memory. But it won't be for him. It'll be for mothers who've been forgotten, for women rebuilding their lives after losing everything they gave. Because love deserves a second chance, too." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Michael clapped first. Then Lena stood and hugged me, the kind of embrace that carries 1,000 unsaid things. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she whispered. And there it was, the moment I'd chased all my life, not through money or sacrifice, but through truth. As dusk settled, laughter returned to that yard. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Marianne's name was never spoken again. Some ghosts are best left in silence. Before leaving, I looked up at the sky, streaked with pink and gold, and thought, maybe this is what peace feels like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. I didn't get back the years I lost, but I gained something deeper, my own voice. And this time, I'll never let anyone take it away again. Because even after betrayal, even after silence, a woman can still rewrite her story. And I did. When I think back to that night, the birthday, the humiliation, the truth that followed, I no longer see it as tragedy. I see it as transformation. Pain was my teacher, silence my test, and truth my reward. For 70 years, I believed love meant endurance. That if I gave enough, forgave enough, stayed quiet enough, I would earn the right to be loved back. But love doesn't demand your silence. It demands your honesty. It asks that you stand tall, even when standing means standing alone. I used to think my story ended in that banquet hall, walking away in shame. But now I understand. That was the prologue. The beginning of a woman reclaiming herself after decades of being everyone's support and no one's priority. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't something you offer to erase the past. It's what you give yourself to stop reliving it. I forgave my daughter, not because she deserved it immediately, but because I deserved peace more than I deserved revenge. And peace is quieter, gentler, more stubborn than bitterness. When people ask me if I love Lena the same way I did before, I smile and say, no. I love her differently now, without chains, without guilt, without fear. I love her as one adult loves another, both flawed, both learning, both carrying the same scar from opposite sides. And to the mothers who are listening, the ones who've been replaced, ignored, or forgotten, hear me. You are not a failure because someone else couldn't see your worth. You are not the sum of their rejection. You are the heartbeat that refuses to go silent. The world may call us fragile, but it takes immense strength to keep loving after being unseen. That's not weakness. That's sacred resilience. I know now that the truest kind of justice isn't revenge. It's restoration. It's standing in your truth with dignity, refusing to shrink for anyone ever again. To the daughters, if your mother is still alive, call her. If she's not, speak to her anyway. Our mothers never truly leave us. They linger in our gestures, our fears, our laughter. And sometimes they forgive us long before we forgive ourselves. When I walk through my garden now, I see the lilacs blooming again. The same flowers that once grew outside the house where I raised Lena. I touch them and whisper, we made it. Because we did. Not perfectly, not without pain, but with truth. And that's enough. If you've stayed with me through my story, thank you. Tell me, what city or country are you watching from? I'd love to know whose hearts these words have reached. Leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe to stay with me on the next journey. And if you'd like to support these life stories, send a super thanks. Every bit helps me keep telling them. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.